A silver fog drifted lazily along the narrow lanes of Harrogate-on-Thames, muffling sound and swallowing lamplight, as if the village itself held its breath. Above the weathered rooftops, the old Blackthorn Manor loomed like a brooding sentinel, its attic windows unblinking, its silence oppressive. Inside, a sudden crash shattered the stillness. Moments later, a scream, raw, ragged, cut through the fog. By the time Hercule Poirot arrived at the manor, summoned urgently by Inspector Japp, the body of Edmund Blackthorn lay twisted on the attic floor, and every door had been locked from within. Chapter 1. The Locked Attic. The fog that night had the temperament of a living creature, thick, shifting, deliberate in its silencing of the world. It coiled about the hedgerows of Harrogate-on-Thames and pressed its cold fingers against the windows of Blackthorn Manor, turning the great house into a mute silhouette on the hill. Even the distant river seemed to hush its eternal murmuring, as though it too sensed that something malign, something sharp and unseen, prowled the edges of the night. Hercule Poirot paused beneath the manor's looming awning, brushing a bead of mist from his immaculate moustache. To Inspector Japp, broad-shouldered, no-nonsense, and very much disgruntled by being out in this weather, Poirot appeared entirely unbothered by the chill. He adjusted the crease of his sleeve with a fussy precision that contrasted sharply with the grim urgency of the moment. "Always the same, Poirot," Japp muttered as he rapped on the heavy door. "Murder in an attic, dead aristocrat on the floor, and here you are worried about a wrinkle." Poirot smiled serenely. "Mon ami, a wrinkle is like a lie. It suggests a lack of order, and tonight I suspect we shall find disorder in abundance." The door creaked open. A pale, trembling maid stood there, her eyes wide with shock. "Inspector, sir! Monsieur Poirot! Thank goodness you're here! It's Mr. Blackthorn. He's— Yes, Japp cut in. "Show us the way." They ascended the grand staircase, their steps muffled by the crimson runner. The manor, once a symbol of prestige, now felt like a mausoleum. Cold halls echoing with the hollow groans of unseen draughts, portraits staring down with morose disapproval, the faint scent of smoke lingering, though no fire burned anywhere. At the top floor, the maid led them down a narrow corridor. "He was found in the attic," she whispered. "The door was locked. We had to break it open." Poirot's brows lifted. "A locked room, you say? Ah, déjà je suis intrigué." Japp gave him a look. "Don't get excited just yet. Could be an accident." Poirot nodded graciously, though his eyes sparkled. "There are no accidents in murder, mon ami." The attic door hung crooked in its frame, splintered where the constables had forced entry. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and the faintest tinge of kerosene. A broken lantern lay on the floor, its glass shattered like ice across the wooden boards. Boxes and trunks sat haphazardly, their lids ajar, their contents in disarray. And there, sprawled beside a toppled chest, lay Edmund Blackthorn. Poirot approached with reverent quiet, his footsteps uncharacteristically subdued on the old creaking boards. Edmund's body was twisted unnaturally, one arm bent beneath him, the other outstretched toward the window as if reaching for something or someone. His face was frozen in an expression of shock, the mouth slightly open, the eyes wide. Poirot crouched, examining the body with a practiced eye. "The limbs tell us much," he murmured. "Monsieur Blackthorn did not fall from a simple misstep. This posture, it suggests a struggle." Japp folded his arms. "Dr. Avery says death occurred within the hour. Witnesses claim they heard a scream, but there's no weapon, no intruder, and no way out except that door, which as you see was locked from the inside. Poirot rose and surveyed the attic. The window was latched. The floor bore several partial footprints in the dust, some overlapping, some smudged. A large wooden trunk was overturned, spilling its contents, faded letters tied with brittle ribbon, yellowing ledger papers, and a torn photograph. Poirot plucked the photo from the debris. 4 people stood together, but only one face remained fully visible, that of Edmund Blackthorne. The 3 others had been violently scratched out, leaving the paper lacerated. "Quel dommage," Poirot whispered. "Someone wished to erase more than memories." Japp stepped closer. "Recognize anyone in it?" "No, but I believe this is significant. Look, on the back." Scrawled in dark ink, "The attic hides the first truth. Beware the second." Japp scowled. "Blast these cryptic messages. Always get one in these old manor cases." Poirot tucked the photo into his pocket. Monsieur Blackthorne was expecting danger. He knew something, and he wished to record it. But to whom did he mean this warning? Poirot moved toward the window. Though latched, the pane bore faint scratches, horizontal and recent. He touched the marks delicately, frowning. Someone attempted to open this window. From the inside or the outside, I cannot yet say. He leaned close, noting a faint disturbance in the layer of dust on the sill. A hand rested here recently. Japp's brow furrowed. But nobody left the house. All exits are guarded. Poirot's moustache quivered, his eyes lighting with intellectual excitement. Just so. Therefore, mon ami, we must consider, did the murderer vanish into thin air? He tapped a finger against his temple. Or did he never leave at all? Japp grunted. I'll question the staff. You look around. Poirot nodded, turning his attention to the overturned chest. He sifted through the letters. Most mundane, a few marked with peculiar stamps. But one caught his eye. A half-burned envelope with Edmund's name written in a shaking hand. The letter inside was singed around the edges. I know you have discovered my secret. Meet me in the attic tonight. Come alone. Poirot read it twice before slipping it away. Someone invited Edmund to his death, he murmured. He continued his meticulous search. Along the far wall stood a row of old wardrobes. The first contained nothing of interest. The second, however, held a blanket covering the floor. And beneath it, Poirot discovered a small metal object. He lifted it with his handkerchief. A brass button with a unique crest. Ornate, expensive, and certainly not belonging to a servant's uniform. A clue, perhaps. Mais oui, he whispered. Then, as Poirot stepped back, something crunched beneath his shoe. He knelt again, retrieving a tiny fragment of glass, distinct from the lantern shards. This one was curved, thicker, and tinted subtly. A monocle, Poirot deduced, or spectacles. But Edmund wore neither. The detective rose, brushing dust carefully from his trousers. Who among the household wears glasses? He wondered aloud. Before he could ponder further, the attic door creaked as Japp returned. I've rounded up the 3 closest connections to Blackthorne, the inspector said. Sister, business partner, governess, all downstairs waiting for your brainy theatrics. Poirot smiled faintly. They wait? How kind. But we are not done here. He walked to the centre of the attic, sealing the scene in his memory. The shattered lantern, the displaced objects, the hidden letter, the footprints, the torn photograph, the scratches on the window, the locked door. Poirot exhaled slowly. This room is a stage, and the performance was carefully arranged. Japp frowned. So what's your early read? Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, turning in a slow circle. Observe, mon ami. Had Edmund been attacked by a stranger, we should expect signs of violent disarray. But here, The disturbance is targeted, deliberate, not a wild struggle, but a controlled one. He pointed to the footprints. Multiple prints, yet only one body. Someone stood very close to him, here. He traced an invisible outline with his foot. And then, after striking or pushing him, they stepped back, quietly, deliberately. Japp rubbed his temple. That still doesn't explain how they got out. Ah, Poirot said softly, but perhaps they never intended to leave. He walked to the door, running a finger along the inner keyhole. Locked from the inside, yes, but a clever technique exists, using string to pull the key from the outside once the door is closed. A method known to stage magicians and clever murderers. The inspector's eyes widened. You think this was staged to look impossible? Poirot nodded. Très certainement. Poirot bent once more beside Edmund's body. Look at the direction he fell. His eyes are open, staring toward the window. He saw someone familiar. He raised a hand, perhaps to shield himself. Poirot pressed lightly where a faint line of bruising formed on Edmund's neck. He was pushed, with force. Japp asked, but who? Poirot rose gracefully. Who benefits from Edmund's death? Who feared what secrets he kept? Who knew of this attic? Who could lure him here? He paused. And who wears spectacles? Japp blinked. You found something? Poirot tapped his breast pocket. I found many somethings. Suddenly, a voice rang from the corridor. Inspector Japp! Monsieur Poirot! A constable appeared, breathless. Someone's been searching Mr. Blackthorn's study, ransacking it. Japp swore under his breath. Perfect! Killer's still in the house. Poirot gave a small, sharp smile. But of course, they must retrieve what they fear we will discover. He glanced around the attic once more. The first truth is here, he murmured, recalling the message on the photograph. And the second, perhaps downstairs, waiting to be uncovered before another murder follows. Poirot turned toward the door. Come, mon ami, let us speak with those who knew the dead man better than any clue could. As they stepped from the attic, the wind moaned through the eaves, a low, mournful cry. The door creaked shut behind them, slowly, almost as if unseen hands guided it closed. Downstairs, Blackthorn Manor seemed to hold its breath once again, awaiting the next revelation. Chapter 2. The Blackthorn Heirs. The drawing-room of Blackthorn Manor was a theatre of tension. Every breath a performance, every silence a waiting curtain. Once a place of cheerful gatherings and elaborate soirees, it now felt suffocated beneath the weight of grief, fear, and unspoken hatred. The heavy velvet drapes muted the morning light into thin, sickly streaks. A faint fire crackled in the hearth, doing little to dispel the coldness that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Poirot entered with recited elegance, hands behind his back, gaze alert but gracious. Japp followed, less graceful and far more irritable, though his keen eyes scanned the room with practiced suspicion. 3 individuals awaited them, standing apart as though proximity alone might implicate them in the murder of Edmund Blackthorn. Poirot studied them with the intensity of a jeweller examining precious stones, seeking flaws, fractures, hidden depths. He bowed slightly. Mesdames et messieurs, he said softly, I thank you for your patience. It is never easy to be called to account at such a time. The 3 suspects remained silent, each locked in their own private storm. She stood by the mantelpiece, a tall figure draped in mourning black, though her expression was anything but sorrowful. Her angular features, once undoubtedly beautiful, were tightened by bitterness. Her lips pressed thin, her glacier blue eyes sharp as cut glass. Let's dispense with pleasantries, Lydia said coldly. You want to know who killed Edmund? Look no further than Edmund himself. He created every enemy he ever suffered. Poirot approached her gently. Mademoiselle Lydia, grief does not always soften the heart. Grief? She laughed without warmth. I have not felt grief for that man in 20 years. Japp raised a brow. You didn't get along, I take it. Lydia scoffed. Inspector, if Edmund were dangling over a cliff, and all it took to save him was for me to reach out a hand, I would sooner turn away. Poirot nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the venom behind each word. And yet, he said, you returned to the manor today. She hesitated, for the first time showing a crack in her control. I came for one reason only, to reclaim what is rightfully mine. Edmund stole my inheritance. He claimed our father's will was ambiguous. He lied, as he lied about everything. Poirot's gaze flicked momentarily to her hands, gloved, trembling ever so slightly. You came to demand restitution. No, she replied, the word sharp as a knife. I came to demand justice. Poirot took note. A powerful motive, a powerful hatred. But hatred does not always equate to murder. And Lydia, for all her boldness, possessed the air of someone who wished to appear guilty while hiding something far more delicate beneath. Charles Harwood sat heavily on a chaise near the window, a handkerchief pressed to his perspiring brow. He was a thick man, with a ruddy face and watery eyes that darted nervously at every sound. Inspector, Monsieur Poirot, he stammered, you must believe me. I'm devastated by Edmund's death, truly devastated. Poirot approached. Are you devastated, Monsieur Harwood, or terrified? Charles flinched. Both, he whispered. Edmund, he was difficult, yes, but he was my friend, my partner. I would never harm him. Poirot gestured to a nearby chair. May I sit? I sense that your heart carries a burden. Charles nodded miserably. Edmund was meticulous, he said, precise to a fault. He expected perfection from everyone, especially me. I managed his accounts, his properties, his more delicate dealings. Japp interjected. What do you mean by delicate? Charles swallowed hard. He had a talent for knowing people's secrets. He kept documents, notes, things he could use if necessary. I told him to stop, to burn them, but he refused, said they were insurance. Poirot's moustache twitched. And did he possess insurance on you, monsieur? Charles looked away, his silence answering the question. Poirot pressed gently. Did someone benefit from obtaining those papers? Enough to enter Edmund's study after his death? Charles's hands trembled violently. I've told you everything I know. Poirot observed him. Fear, guilt, but of what kind? Some of the man's trembling was genuine. Some of it, Poirot suspected, was performance. Eliza stood apart from the others, her posture rigid, but her hands clasped tightly at her waist. She was a woman of quiet demeanour, with soft brown eyes and hair drawn modestly into a bun. Everything about her suggested a desire to remain unnoticed. Yet Poirot noticed her most of all. Mademoiselle Thorne, he said warmly, you must have been close to Monsieur Blackthorne once. Eliza hesitated. I worked here many years ago. I was governess to Mr. Blackthorne's nieces and nephews. Japp frowned. Why'd you come back? She lowered her eyes. I found some of their old belongings while clearing storage in my cottage. I thought it only proper to return them. Poirot did not correct her lie, yet. He could see it, taste it, almost smell it in the air. A lie told not to deceive Poirot, but to protect something fragile. And when did you last speak with Edmund? Poirot asked. Eliza's breath caught, almost imperceptibly. Several weeks ago. Ah, Poirot said softly. And was it a pleasant conversation? Her silence broke under the weight of her conscience. No, it was painful. Japp leaned forward. In what way? Eliza looked up, eyes wet. Edmund remembered things from my past, things I wished forgotten. He said he might reveal them if I did not assist him in a personal matter. I refused. Poirot nodded gently. Blackmail? Eliza's hands shook. He called it leverage. Poirot offered her a handkerchief. As she dabbed her eyes, Poirot's mind hummed. A gentle woman, too gentle to kill, or gentle enough until cornered. When the interviews concluded, Poirot paced slowly across the drawing room, each step measured. The suspect stood before him. 3 portraits of guilt, but guilt of different colours. Lydia's was a hot, seething anger, years in the making. Charles carried the trembling fear of exposure. Eliza hid a delicate shame, one not easily confessed. Poirot sensed each was connected to Edmund's darker dealings, each held by invisible strings Edmund had woven like a puppeteer. Japp cleared his throat. So Poirot. All of them had motive. Poirot lifted a finger. Oui, but motive alone does not a murderer make. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping the room. It is not enough to hate a man, Inspector. One must also have opportunity, courage, and a certain level of ingenuity. He tilted his head. And our murderer, I suspect, is very ingenious indeed. Poirot took a seat, steepling his fingers as he addressed them all. You must understand the attic was not chosen at random. Someone wanted privacy. Someone wanted control over the environment. And someone knew the layout of the manor well enough to orchestrate a locked-room illusion. Lydia's chin lifted defiantly. You accuse me? No, Poirot replied. Not yet. Turned to Charles. You arrived breathless at the study. Very conveniently. Charles flushed. Poirot then looked to Eliza. And you, mademoiselle, speak softly, but your guilt shouts in your silence. Eliza blinked rapidly. I haven't done anything. Poirot smiled kindly. Sometimes, mademoiselle, we are guilty of far more than we realize. He rose and walked to the window, gazing out into the receding fog. Edmund Blackthorne was a man who held threads of power, and perhaps one of you grew tired of being manipulated, or perhaps he turned back to them, eyes narrowing. Someone feared what Edmund was about to reveal. The room grew heavy, suffocating. Poirot removed the torn photograph from his pocket and held it before them. You see this image? Edmund stands with 3 others, but their faces have been violently scratched away. Lydia scoffed. Childish dramatics. Charles wiped his forehead. I've never seen it. Eliza shivered. He kept everything, every scrap of history. Poirot's gaze sharpened. All 3 of you appear in this photograph. They froze. Yes, Poirot continued. I recognize each of your silhouettes. This was taken long before the 3 of you drifted from Edmund's orbit. Perhaps during a summer gathering here at the manor. He flipped the photo, and written on the back was a warning. Someone wished to conceal a truth, and Edmund, I suspect, wished to expose it. Japp muttered under his breath, and someone killed him for it. Poirot did not disagree. A knock on the drawing-room door interrupted the charged silence. A maid leaned in. Inspector, sir, the study looks worse now than before, as if someone's been tearing through it again. Japp swore. Poirot placed a hand on his arm. Calm yourself, mon ami. The guilty mind acts rashly when cornered. It seeks to retrieve or destroy evidence. He turned to the suspects. One of you has been back to that study. Perhaps you feared we would find something. Lydia, Charles, and Eliza exchanged looks, carefully controlled, but revealing flickers of panic. Poirot's lips curved subtly. A house like this, filled with secrets, speaks in murmurs. And I assure you, I hear everything. Poirot stepped in front of each suspect in turn. To Lydia. You hated your brother, but hatred alone is not enough. Have you the agility to climb trellises, the audacity to stage a locked-room murder? Lydia's eyes flashed. I would not soil my hands climbing walls like a common thief. Poirot's eyebrow rose. Oh, your youthful escapades disagree. She froze. To Charles, you fear disgrace more than death. A desperate man might commit desperate acts, but are you clever enough to engineer such a scene? Charles wrung his hands. I could never. I'm no criminal mastermind, Poirot murmured. You underestimate yourself, perhaps intentionally. To Eliza, you are gentle, yes, but desperation gives even the meek courage. Did you lure Edmund to his death to protect your secret? Eliza shook her head violently. No, I wanted only to be left in peace. Poirot softened. Peace, mademoiselle, often requires sacrifice. She burst into tears. As the emotions rose, Poirot stepped back, eyes half-lidded in concentration. His mind sifted the clues like a meticulous clockmaker examining gears. Each clue was a note. Together they formed a melody. And Poirot was beginning to hear the tune. He tapped a finger against his chin. Each of you hides something, he said softly. A lie, a truth, a fear. He stepped forward. And someone among you is dangerous. Lydia clenched her jaw. Charles trembled. Eliza looked ready to faint. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Let us see, mes amis, who breaks under pressure. Before anyone could speak, a constable entered hurriedly. Inspector, Monsieur Poirot, the study. There's been another disturbance. The desk's secret compartment was forced open, and something's missing. Japp stiffened. What now? The constable swallowed. A confession letter, written by Edmund Blackthorne. Addressed to you, sir. Poirot's smile vanished. And it is gone? Yes. Poirot's eyes flashed with intensity. Then the murderer grows bold and frightened. He straightened sharply. Mes amis, the game has begun in earnest. Chapter 3. The Empty Compartment. The corridor outside Edmund Blackthorne's study was colder than the rest of the manor, as though the house itself recoiled from whatever secrets were entombed within its walls. Poirot moved ahead with quick, decisive steps, his polished shoes whispering over the worn runner carpet. Japp followed, muttering under his breath, while the constable trailed behind them, pale and uneasy. When they entered the study, Poirot stopped dead. The room, once meticulously ordered, now resembled a battlefield. Drawers hung open like gaping mouths. Books lay scattered across the Persian rug. The desk, massive, mahogany, immovable, had been forced open once more. But Poirot's eyes went straight to the wall panel behind it. The hidden compartment, previously closed, was now exposed. Empty. He approached it with quiet reverence, as though standing over a grave. This, Poirot murmured, touching the edges of the false panel, was opened not with panic, but with purpose. Japp huffed. Whoever took the letter must have done it fast. We were only gone 10 minutes. Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami. The thief knew exactly where to go. They needed only opportunity. He turned slowly, examining the room with his keen, needle-sharp gaze. Someone had been searching for something specific. Not wealth, not jewels, information. The kind Edmund hoarded like a dragon sitting atop a mountain of secrets. The constable stepped forward nervously. Sir, you should know. There was a torn scrap left behind. Poirot extended a hand. The constable placed a small fragment of paper into Poirot's palm. Only a few words remained, written in Edmund's firm hand. cannot keep this buried any longer." Poirot closed his eyes. "A confession indeed," he breathed. "But of what?" Japp scratched the back of his neck. Confession or no confession, someone wanted it gone badly enough to break in twice. Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes, and that tells us two things. First, the letter contained something damning. Second, the murderer fears the truth more than being caught." He moved toward the smashed ink pot on the desk, its dark stains spreading like spilled blood. "The timing is curious, n'est-ce pas? The disturbance occurred after we interviewed our 3 suspects. Someone panicked." Poirot knelt to inspect the rug. A trail of ink droplets led toward the window. The same window with the faint scratch on the sill. He touched the mark with a gloved fingertip. "Inspector," Poirot said quietly, "notice the direction of the smear." Japp leaned in. "Looks like someone climbed back out." "Or climbed back in," Poirot corrected. The revelation hung in the stale air. Someone had staged the break-in to look like an outsider's doing. Someone clever. Someone who knew how to exploit the manor's blind spots. Poirot stood, dusting his hands. "We must speak once more with our trio of suspects. Their reactions will tell us what the evidence cannot." They reconvened in the drawing room. Lydia paced near the fire with restless energy. Charles sank into the sofa like a man awaiting a medical diagnosis, and Eliza stood rigidly by the door as though contemplating escape. Poirot entered with a serene expression that belied the storm in his mind. "Mes amis," he began softly, "a letter has been stolen. A letter written by Edmund to myself." Lydia stopped pacing. Charles choked on his breath. Eliza's eyes widened. Poirot watched them carefully. "Someone returned to the study," he continued, "to claim a final piece of leverage, or to destroy it." He stepped closer. "And I must know, which of you fears Edmund's words from beyond the grave?" Lydia broke first. "Don't look at me. I refuse to be blamed for whatever paranoid notes Edmund penned before his death." Poirot tilted his head. "You seemed very confident earlier. Now you sound defensive." Lydia's jaw tightened. Next he turned to Charles. "Monsieur Harwood, you handled Edmund's financial affairs. Did his confession concern you?" Charles was trembling visibly now. I swear I know nothing of any letter. Edmund only warned me once that he kept insurance. I didn't think he actually—" Poirot raised a hand gently. "Merci. You may stop." Finally, he approached Eliza. She stood still, hands clasped, eyes glistening. "Did you take the letter, mademoiselle?" Her voice shook. "No, I haven't set foot in that room since the night I came to return the children's belongings. I didn't even know Edmund kept our compartment." Poirot's gaze softened. "Sometimes, Mademoiselle Thorne, knowledge returns at inconvenient times." Eliza's composure slipped. Tears brimmed. "You think I did this? That I killed him to protect my past? I wanted nothing from Edmund, nothing. I only wanted to be left alone." Poirot nodded gently, filing away the emotional cadence of her words. "And yet," he thought silently, "your fear is the strongest of all." Japp stepped forward. "Poirot, any of them could have slipped upstairs in 10 minutes. Lydia's temper, Charles's nerves, Eliza's secrets, they've all got motive." Poirot sighed lightly. "Perhaps, but one thing troubles me." He held up the torn scrap. "This phrase, 'cannot keep this buried any longer,' does not speak of blackmail. It speaks of guilt, regret, a burden." Lydia scoffed. "My brother felt no regret for anything." "Precisely," Poirot replied, "which means the confession may not have been about his crimes, but someone else's." A silence fell so deep it seemed to swallow the air. Poirot glanced toward the window. and that someone is in this house." Lydia blanched. Charles's breath hitched. Eliza swayed slightly where she stood. Poirot took a slow breath. "We are no longer dealing with a simple murder. We are dealing with a truth that Edmund Blackthorne intended to reveal. Truth so dangerous that someone risked everything to stop him." Japp frowned. "Dangerous to whom?" Poirot looked at the three faces before him. "To perhaps all of them," he said softly, "or to one of them above the others." He stepped back. "You see, Inspector, the murderer now makes mistakes. They grow desperate." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And desperation, mon ami, is the enemy of the criminal mind." Poirot slipped the torn fragment into his pocket and turned toward the door. "It is time," he said, "to dig into the past. What Edmund Blackthorne tried to exhume, we must uncover." Behind him, one of the suspects exhaled shakily, too shakily. Poirot heard it. He always heard everything. And he smiled, just slightly. "For now," he thought, "the murderer believes themselves clever. Let them. Their downfall begins with the fear they cannot hide." He stepped into the hall. The manor groaned around him, as though it knew what was coming. Chapter 4. Whispers in the walls night pressed heavily upon Blackthorne Manor, as though the fog outside had seeped into its very bones. Poirot made his way down the narrow servants' stairwell, lantern in hand, the faint flame struggling against the darkness. The air grew colder with each step, and even Poirot, who prided himself on calm rationality, felt a peculiar sensation creeping along the edges of his mind. It was as though the house watched him. "This manor," Poirot murmured to himself, "is most uncooperative. Too many corners, too many secrets." He reached the lower hall, where the stone floor always remained cold. From here, a seldom-used corridor led to a row of storage rooms, wine cellars, and an old boiler chamber that had been locked for years. At least, Poirot thought it had been locked. But tonight, the door stood ajar. He approached with measured steps. The hinges emitted a soft groan as he pushed it fully open. A stale, earthen smell drifted out, the scent of damp bricks, old coal dust, and something else, something metallic. Poirot entered. The lantern light trembled across the room, revealing broken crates, rusted tools, and a workbench littered with scraps of knotted string. But what caught Poirot's eye was the floor. A faint trail of disturbed dust led from the far wall toward a narrow gap behind the old furnace. He followed it. "A secret passage," he whispered. "But of course." Poirot pulled aside a loose board, revealing a dark cavity barely large enough for a person to squeeze through. He lowered the lantern. Scratch marks lined the inside. Recent, desperate. Someone had been using this passage, someone who needed to move unseen. Poirot's heart ticked faster. Mon Dieu! The murderer could have used this to access the attic. He turned abruptly. Behind him, the boiler chamber door slammed shut. Poirot froze, calling out sharply, "Who is there?" No answer, only a faint shuffle. He lifted the lantern higher, feeling the cold bite his skin. For a moment, he thought he saw a shadow move, swift, low, purposeful, before it vanished into the corridor beyond. Poirot's jaw tightened. "This house," he muttered, "seeks to frighten Hercule Poirot. Impossible!" He strode out, but his usual calm bore a controlled edge. As Poirot returned to the main floor, he found Lydia Blackthorne standing alone near the grand staircase. Her posture was taut, shoulders high, as though listening for something distant. She spun when she heard Poirot approach. "They said you were in the wine cellars," she snapped. "What were you doing down there? Hunting rats?" Poirot bowed slightly. Madame, in my experience, rats sometimes understand more than people. Lydia's lips thinned. I'm not in the mood for riddles. Yet riddles surround you, Poirot replied. She looked away. Poirot stepped closer, his eyes narrowing with gentle precision. Tell me, Madame Blackthorne, what truth did your brother fear? What confession was so terrible he risked his life to reveal it? Her complexion paled. I told you, I don't know anything about a letter. Mais oui, that is what you said. Yet when I mention a confession, you tremble. Why? Lydia took a step back, pressing her hand to the banister, as if steadying herself. Edmund was a cruel man. He collected weaknesses. He held them over people. Perhaps he intended to expose someone, but not me. Poirot studied her face. You are afraid of something, madame, and fear is very instructive. Lydia's voice cracked. You don't understand what it means to live in this house, to grow up here. Secrets are currency. Poirot's eyes glimmered. Secrets, yes, but which one murdered your brother? Before Lydia could respond, a sudden crash echoed from upstairs. Poirot turned sharply. Ah, another disturbance. Lydia backed away. I had nothing to do with that. Poirot moved past her briskly. Then, perhaps, he said, we shall soon meet the person who did. At the top of the stairs, Poirot found Charles Harwood standing outside a guest room, his face white as parchment. Took me by surprise, Charles stammered. I was just passing when I heard the noise. Poirot looked past him into the room. A mirror lay shattered on the floor, but not from a fall, from a blow. Poirot stepped into the room slowly. Why would someone strike a mirror? He whispered. Charles hovered at the door. Angry ghost? Poirot's eyebrow lifted with disdain. Please, monsieur, let us leave the supernatural to the novelists. He crouched. Among the scattered glass shards lay a single object, a folded page torn from a ledger book. Poirot picked it up. Monsieur Harwood, he said quietly, did you know Edmund kept secondary financial records? Charles's breath hitched audibly. Poirot unfolded the page. It contained a list of payments, large sums, made to a name that made Poirot's lips part in surprise. Eliza Thorne. Charles staggered backward. She told me she barely knew Edmund. Poirot held up a finger. Non, monsieur. She said she wished to be left alone. That is not the same thing. He folded the page into his pocket. But we must ask ourselves, why was this torn page hidden here? And who broke the mirror to conceal its discovery? Charles swallowed hard. I don't know anything about buried passages or secret payments. All I wanted was to keep Edmund from destroying my reputation. But murder? I would never. Poirot stepped closer. Your fear grows each hour, he murmured. Fear of what Edmund uncovered, or fear of what I will uncover? Before Charles could respond, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Light, careful, almost furtive. Poirot turned sharply. Miss Thorne, he called. Eliza froze at the corner, eyes darting between Poirot and Charles. Poirot lifted the ledger page. Would you care, he asked softly, to explain why Edmund was sending you money? Her face drained of colour. I can't, she whispered. Poirot's voice dropped to a quiet, decisive tone. Then, mademoiselle, for your own safety, you must. Eliza's lips trembled. She looked from the broken mirror to the dark hallway behind her, as if calculating escape. And then she spoke, barely audible. It wasn't money, she said. It was payment for silence. Poirot's breath stilled. Eliza stepped closer, voice shaking. Edmund wasn't blackmailing me. He was protecting me from someone far worse. Poirot's eyes sharpened instantly. "And that someone," he whispered, "is still in this house." A gust of wind groaned through the manor, rattling the shutters like skeletal fingers. Eliza flinched. Poirot stood perfectly still, his gaze cutting through the darkness. "The truth, mademoiselle," he said softly, "is knocking very loudly, and it demands to be let in." Chapter 5. The Governess's Burden. For a long moment, the corridor lay in breathless silence. The flickering wall sconce cast trembling shadows across Eliza Thorne's face as she stood before Poirot. Fragile, haunted, yet strangely resolute. A woman cornered by her own past. Jap arrived behind Poirot, having been summoned by Charles's panicked shouting. His eyes darted from the broken mirror to Eliza's trembling form. "What's this?" he demanded. "What's she done now?" Poirot raised a hand. "Non, Inspector. It is not what she has done, but what has been done to her." Eliza swallowed hard. "I shouldn't tell you. I shouldn't tell anyone. It will only cause more harm." Poirot stepped closer, his expression softening. "Mademoiselle, secrets are like weights. The longer one carries them, the heavier they become. And Edmund Blackthorne knew something of your burden. Did he not?" Her eyes widened with pain. "Edmund paid me," she whispered, voice cracking, "but not to silence me about something he did. No, he paid me to keep quiet about someone else." Poirot nodded gently. "Yes, this much I have already deduced, but tell me, who was he protecting?" Eliza shook her head violently. "If I say it, everything will collapse. This family, the manor, perhaps even me. Then," Poirot said softly, "it is already collapsing." Her composure fractured. She pressed both hands against her mouth, steadying herself. "You must understand, I came here 7 years ago, when the children were young. I was desperate, penniless, barely able to feed myself. Lydia Blackthorne hired me on the spot. She said she saw potential in me." Lydia scoffed from the far end of the hall. "Oh, don't make this sentimental. You were hired because we needed a low-cost governess, nothing more." Eliza flinched but continued. "For months, everything was normal. Then, strange things began happening. Notes left in my room, unlocked windows, footsteps in the nursery after midnight." Charles shuddered. "This house has always been drafty and old." "No," Eliza whispered. "This was deliberate. Someone was watching me, following me." Poirot's brows furrowed. "Stalking you?" "Yes," she said, "and one night I caught him." The corridor thickened with tension. Eliza's voice dropped to a raw whisper. "It was Edmund!" Lydia erupted. "Impossible!" Charles staggered back. "He wouldn't. Edmund wasn't." Poirot raised a hand. "Let her speak." Eliza pressed on. "I woke to the sound of someone in my room. Edmund stood there at the foot of my bed. I screamed, and he swore it was all a misunderstanding. Said he thought he heard something in the attic above, and came to check, but his excuse made no sense." Poirot asked quietly, "He harmed you?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Not physically, but he frightened me, terrified me. And then, a week later, he came to me privately and confessed something terrible." She met Poirot's gaze. "He said he wasn't the only one watching me." The detective stiffened. "He told me someone in the household had become obsessed, dangerous, that he feared for my safety, and that he would protect me." Poirot's voice lowered. "And in return?" "He asked me to keep silent," she whispered, "for the sake of the children, for the sake of the family. Edmund said the truth would ruin lives." Jap scratched his head. "Protect you from who? Who was this dangerous person?" Eliza looked between Lydia, Charles, and the shadowed corridor ahead. "I don't know." "What?" Lydia spat. "You expect us to believe that?" "He never told me a name," she said. only that the person was close, very close, and that revealing them would tear the family apart. Poirot considered this. Edmund was protecting you, but not from himself. Eliza nodded slowly. I thought he was manipulating me. I thought he was trying to make himself seem noble after frightening me. But then... Her voice trembled. But then I found letters. Anonymous letters slipped beneath my door at night. They described exactly what I wore each day, what rooms I entered. They even referenced things I never told a soul. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Stalking again. Yes, Eliza whispered, with frightening accuracy. She paused, trembling, and the handwriting did not match Edmund's. Japp stepped forward, suddenly alert. Did you keep them? No, I burned them. They terrified me. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Then Edmund paid you to stay silent, not about an indiscretion, but about a threat, a predator. Eliza swallowed. He feared that if the truth came out, the guilty person might lash out. Against him, against the family, against me, Charles stammered. But who would do such a thing? Eliza's eyes drifted toward the end of the corridor. Poirot followed her gaze. A faint creak echoed from the attic staircase above. Poirot's voice dropped to a murmur. Who indeed? Poirot gathered himself, folding his hands neatly. Mademoiselle Thorne, there is one thing I must ask. Why did Edmund arrange payments through his business ledgers rather than direct household accounts? Eliza hesitated. He said he didn't want Lydia to know. Lydia stiffened. Why? Would Edmund hide anything from me? Poirot's gaze fell sharply on her. That, madame, he said, is a question you must answer. Lydia's eyes flashed with a mixture of fear and fury. But before she could respond, a loud bang reverberated from upstairs, something falling heavily in the attic. Eliza jumped. Charles gasped. Lydia cursed under her breath. Japp reached for his revolver. Poirot lifted a hand. No, put away the weapon, Inspector. The murderer does not flee. They are not running from us. He looked toward the shadows on the staircase. They are cleaning. Japp blinked. Cleaning what? Poirot's voice was cold, razor-sharp. They're mistakes. He stepped forward, eyes gleaming. And we must reach the attic before the last piece of truth is erased. The wind wailed through the corridor, and the house seemed to shift, breathing, warning, withholding its secrets. Poirot climbed the first stair. Come, Inspector, he said. We pursue a ghost with human hands. And Blackthorn Manor watched them ascend. Chapter 6. The Attic in the Dark. The climb to the attic felt longer this time, each wooden step groaning like an old wound reopening. Poirot led the way, the lantern's glow casting fractured shadows along the walls. Japp followed close behind, revolver holstered but hand hovering near it, while Lydia, Charles and Eliza lingered at the bottom of the stairs, unwilling to ascend but unable to retreat. The manor seemed to hold its breath. Halfway up, the wind pressed against the windows, rattling them like skeletal hands. Poirot paused. There is someone above us, he murmured. Japp's jaw tightened. Then we catch them, before they tidy up whatever they don't want us to find. But Poirot raised a hand. Carefully, mon ami. A frightened murderer is a dangerous one. They reached the landing. The attic door stood slightly open, not smashed as before, but deliberately ajar, as though someone wished to lure them in. Poirot set the lantern down, its light trembling. He pushed the door softly with a fingertip. The attic yawned before them, thick with gloom. Cold air seeped through unseen cracks. The overturned trunk and Edmund's dried blood remained where they had been. But now the room carried a new disturbance. Papers scattered further. Objects moved a second time, as though someone had rifled through everything with frantic hands. Poirot stepped inside. "Do you feel it, Inspector? The desperation?" Japp scanned the corners with caution. "Feels like someone's still here." Poirot nodded. "Oh, they are. Or they were only moments ago. The air tells me so. Your nose is not a barometer," Japp muttered. Poirot smiled faintly. But a detective must perceive more than weather. He moved deeper into the attic. Dust motes drifted through the lantern glow like ghostly dancers. Snowy white sheets draped stacks of furniture, resembling spectres frozen, mid-reverie. Poirot paused before the window. The latch, once firmly closed, was now open. The pane gaped outward into the pouring night rain. Japp swore. "They escaped! Must have climbed down the roof gutter." Poirot shook his head. "No, look closer." The window frame bore no new fingerprints. The dust on the sill was undisturbed. Poirot shut the window gently. "Staged," he murmured. "Someone wanted us to think they fled." Japp exhaled slowly. "So they're still inside the manor." Poirot's eyes glinted. "Exactement." Poirot's attention drifted toward the far corner, where a stack of crates formed a lopsided barrier. Something about the arrangement seemed different. He approached, nudging a box aside with his foot. A smell wafted out, musty, but tinged with something acrid. Poirot bent down. A small metal tin lay hidden behind the crates. Its lid sat loosely atop it. Inside was a wad of cloth soaked in kerosene. Poirot lifted it with his handkerchief. "This," he said quietly, "was used to start a fire." Japp stiffened. "Burn the evidence." Poirot nodded. "Or burn something else." He opened the tin fully. Inside, beneath the soaked cloth, lay charred fragments of another letter. Poirot carefully unfolded the brittle pieces. Only a few words remained legible. "Truth, cannot bear, done in the nursery." Poirot felt a cold ripple travel through him. The nursery. Japp leaned over his shoulder. "Nursery? What the devil does that mean?" Poirot stared at the burnt words for a long moment. "Something happened in that room. Long ago. Something Edmund discovered. And someone has spent years ensuring it never sees daylight." Japp's voice dropped. "Something involving the children." Poirot did not answer. Because at that moment he noticed something else. A faint indentation in the dust on the floorboards. A footprint, small, delicate, feminine. Poirot traced the shape with a gloved finger. "Someone was here moments ago," he whispered, "standing, watching us." Japp spun around. "But where the hell did she go?" Poirot rose, scanning the walls. "She did not leave through the window. She did not pass us on the stairs." His gaze fixed on the largest wardrobe, the one whose doors remained slightly ajar. Poirot approached it slowly, careful not to disturb the dust-covered floorboards. He placed a hand on one door. "Inspector," he said quietly, "be ready." Poirot pulled the wardrobe open. Empty. Only a stack of moth-eaten coats and several hat boxes. But something on the floor caught Poirot's eye. A small metal rod, thin, straight, and bearing a faint bend. He lifted it for Japp to see. "A tension rod," Poirot murmured, "used to pick simple locks." "Lockpicks," Japp growled. "Someone in this house knows how to break into rooms." Poirot nodded slowly. "Inspector, do you recall the attic door earlier?" Japp blinked. "You're saying she didn't wait for you to break it open? She unlocked it herself?" Poirot slipped the rod into his pocket. A trained hand could stage a locked-room murder with ease. Japp exhaled. Christ! As they turned to leave the attic, Poirot paused one final time, glancing over the room. "Someone has been ahead of us at each turn," he murmured, watching, listening, removing what incriminates them, leaving only what they wish us to find. Japp nodded grimly. "She's bold, whoever she is." Poirot shook his head. "No, mon ami, desperate, not bold." He closed the lantern shutter halfway. "We have reached the threshold. Now we must return to the source, the nursery." Japp frowned. "But the kids don't live here anymore. They're grown." "Yes," Poirot said softly, "and that, Inspector, is what makes the room so dangerous." He began descending the stairs, lantern casting long shadows ahead of him. "The truth Edmund feared lies buried in childhood," Poirot murmured. "Something witnessed or done before any of them understood its meaning." Behind them, the attic door creaked closed of its own accord. Poirot did not look back. Japp did, and shuddered. At the bottom of the stairs, Lydia, Charles, and Eliza waited, faces tense, breaths shallow. Lydia stepped forward. "Well, did you find anything?" Poirot answered her with a single chilling sentence. "Yes, I found what someone tried to burn." He held up the charred scrap. "And this time, madame, the flames do not protect you." Lydia's face tightened. But Poirot was no longer looking at her. He was staring at Eliza Thorne. Her expression, fear layered with deeper dread, told him everything he needed. Not guilt, knowledge. She knew what happened in the nursery, and she had been living in its shadow ever since. Poirot spoke softly, but with iron beneath each word. "Now, mademoiselle, you will take us there." Eliza froze. The house groaned above them, like an old secret shifting in its sleep. Chapter 7. The Nursery Door. The corridor leading to the nursery was narrow, dim, and unnaturally cold, as though the very air recoiled from the memories sealed behind that single pale blue door. Eliza Thorne walked ahead, her steps hesitant but determined, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Poirot watched her carefully, her posture, her breathing, the tremble in her fingers. She was a woman dragging her past behind her like a broken limb. Japp followed at Poirot's side. "Tell me," he whispered, "why are we going into a children's room at a time like this?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Because, mon ami, the past does not remain in the past. It stains, it bleeds, and in this case, it kills." They reached the door. The light from the hallway lanterns painted the carved wooden rabbits and dancing lambs in eerie relief. The doorknob was small, meant for a child's hand. It was cold to the touch when Poirot placed his palm upon it. Eliza's breath hitched. "Before you go inside, I must warn you, the nursery isn't right." Japp raised a brow. "Not right how?" Her eyes glistened. "It was locked for years, untouched. Edmund demanded it stay that way. He couldn't bear to enter it, not after—" She stopped herself. Poirot nodded. "Then it is indeed time we open it." He turned the knob slowly. The door creaked open, as though resisting, like a mouth forced to speak truth after years of silence. The nursery lay preserved in a strange stillness, an island of forgotten childhood. Moonlight filtered through lace curtains, illuminating wooden blocks scattered across a rug, a rocking horse frozen mid-sway. Shelves lined with miniature tin soldiers and dolls whose painted eyes gleamed with unsettling life. What caught Japp's immediate attention was the dust. Layers everywhere, except in one straight narrow line leading from the door to the window. "A track," Japp murmured. "Recent." Poirot knelt, brushing a gloved finger along the disturbed dust. "Someone entered this room," he whispered. "Often enough to leave a path." Eliza shrank back. "But the door was locked." Poirot rose. Locked to you, perhaps, but not to one who knows how to use a tension rod. Eliza flinched. Japp scanned the room. What exactly are we looking for? Poirot's gaze landed on the small cot pushed against the far wall. It was draped in a faded pink blanket, embroidered with delicate roses. The pattern had been carefully chosen, lovingly. He walked toward it. Eliza spoke suddenly, voice cracking like ice under pressure. That was Mary's. Poirot stopped. Mary, he repeated. Eliza nodded, tears brimming. Edmund and Lydia's first child. She died at age 4. Japp stiffened. Cos. Eliza shook her head. An accident, they said, but I never believed it. Poirot's gaze hardened. What sort of accident, mademoiselle? Her lips trembled. She fell down the grand staircase. Japp exhaled sharply. Poirot, however, seemed to drift inward, sorting pieces, reordering memories, calling back everything he had observed. Slowly, he pulled back the cot's blanket. Underneath lay a small wooden music box. He lifted it gently. Did this belong to the child? Eliza swallowed. Yes, Mary adored it. She wound it every night. Poirot turned the box over in his hands, pausing when he saw a thin groove scratched into the underside. He pressed it lightly. The bottom panel shifted. Poirot lifted it open. Inside lay a single sheet of folded paper, thin, yellowed, fragile as dried petals. Eliza gasped. I've never seen that before. Poirot nodded. You were not meant to. He unfolded the note. Japp's eyes narrowed as he leaned over. What does it say? Poirot read aloud in a voice low and solemn. I saw her fall. I saw who pushed her. I remember. I must never speak it aloud, but the truth will find its way. One day. Eliza covered her mouth. Edmund, he saw Mary's death. Poirot nodded gravely. Yes, and someone ensured he remained silent. A child's fear becomes an adult's prison. Japp stared around the nursery, voice hoarse. So Edmund was blackmailed with his own memory. Poirot's reply came soft but sharp. Or with his guilt. Eliza trembled. But why? Why hide this note? Poirot closed the music box with a soft click. Because, mademoiselle, Edmund did not know whether the memory was real or implanted. His eyes swept the room, and someone wanted him uncertain. Japp frowned. Implanted? By who? Poirot lifted the lantern, illuminating the far corner where a dollhouse stood, an elaborate miniature replica of the manor itself. He approached it slowly. Children, Poirot said, observe more than adults think, sometimes far more than is safe. He touched the tiny front door of the dollhouse. It creaked open. Inside lay another scrap of paper, this one newer, the ink darker. Poirot pulled it free and unfolded it. A single line stared back. Do not look in the cellar. Japp exhaled. That settles it. She's taunting us. Poirot nodded. Yes, because she knows we are close. Eliza looked dizzy. Who is doing all this? Poirot turned to her. His voice dropped to a whisper. The same person who came into this nursery more than once. The same person who knows the history of this room intimately. The same person who fears what Edmund remembered. Eliza looked at him, frozen. You mean someone in the family? Poirot gently closed the dollhouse door. Oui. A heavy silence fell over them. Poirot stepped back toward the hallway. We leave this room now. Its secrets have spoken, but the cellar... Japp held up a hand. Wait, before we run into another trap. Who do you suspect? Poirot adjusted his cuffs. I suspect, he said quietly, the one person who has been closest to every piece of this tragedy. Before Japp could respond, a sudden sharp sound echoed from downstairs, a door slamming violently. Then a distant scream. Eliza's face blanched. Poirot's eyes flared. "The killer moves!" he whispered. "Now!" He strode from the nursery, voice cold as a blade. "Inspector, after me, quickly!" The nursery door swung shut behind them, plunging the room back into moonlit silence, its toys still, its secrets once more muffled, but no longer asleep. Chapter 8. Into the cellar's breath. The scream cut through the manor like a knife dragged along bone, shrill, brief, and abruptly strangled. Poirot did not run. He moved with purpose, his pace rapid but controlled. Japp's heavier footsteps thundering behind him. Eliza stumbled after them, breathless and pale. They reached the ground floor as the echoes died, swallowed by the cavernous silence of the hall. A draught swept through the space, extinguishing one of the wall lanterns with a sputtering gasp. Japp drew his revolver. Where did it come from? Poirot lifted a hand. Hush! Listen! The house moaned under the weight of the storm outside, but beneath that, yes, there was another sound. Faint, muffled, a dragging noise, then a thud. Poirot's eyes sharpened. The cellar, Japp swore. Of course it's the cellar. That bloody note, do not look in the cellar. It might as well have been a welcome mat. Poirot nodded gravely. Exactly why it concerns me. The murderer wishes us to go there now at this moment. We must be cautious. He approached the heavy door beneath the staircase. The wood was old, warped slightly, and stained darker near the hinges as though the house had long ago cried into its own bones. Poirot placed a hand on the latch. Eliza, he said gently without looking back, you must remain here. But she shook her head violently. No, I won't be left alone. Not while he, whoever he is, walks these halls. Poirot studied her a moment, then nodded. Very well, stay close. He opened the door. A gust of cold, damp air surged up the stairwell, carrying with it the scents of stone, mildew, and something else, metallic and sharp blood. The lantern light stretched thin as they descended, shadows distorting into grotesque shapes along the walls. The steps groaned under their weight, protesting each footfall. The cellar opened before them, a cavernous space of brick arches and ancient wine racks. Barrels lined the walls like slumbering giants. The darkness pooled thickly in the corners. Poirot lifted the lantern high. And there she was, Lydia Redgrave, collapsed on the cold stone floor, her nightdress torn, her hair wild, eyes wide with terror. She wasn't dead, but she hovered precariously close. Blood trickled from her temple, seeping into the cracks between the stones. Eliza gasped, Lydia! Poirot knelt swiftly at Lydia's side. Madame, can you hear me? Her lips trembled, breath shallow. I tried to get away. He pushed me. Poirot narrowed his eyes. He? Her gaze flickered toward the darkness. But as Japp raised his lantern and swung the beam across the room, there was no one. Only stacked crates, glistening bottles, and the oppressive hush that soaked the air with dread. Japp muttered, He must have slipped out. There's another door down here, isn't there? Poirot nodded. A service exit, once used by deliveries, but locked now, unless someone recently acquired a key. He rose slowly. Lydia clutched at Poirot's sleeve. You must believe me. I came down here because I heard footsteps. I thought it was Edmund. He used to hide things down here. Things he said were important. Poirot's eyebrows lifted. Important? He repeated. She nodded weakly. Documents, old papers. He kept them in a wooden chest behind the wine crates. Japp moved immediately. Show? Me? Poirot raised a hand. No, Inspector. Allow me. He approached the stack of dusty crates. With a firm push, he shifted them aside, revealing a small wooden trunk. Its lid cracked and its lock broken. Broken recently. Poirot murmured. He opened it. Inside were papers, dozens of pages, some yellowed, some newer, letters, clinic bills, notes scrawled hastily. Poirot lifted the top page. Japp peered over his shoulder. "What is it?" Poirot's eyes darkened. "A medical report." Eliza's voice wavered. Medical? For who?" Poirot held the page closer to the lantern. "Mary." Silence struck the cellar like a blow. Eliza staggered back. Lydia's breath hitched into a sob. Japp's mouth hardened into a grim line. Poirot continued reading, his voice a quiet scalpel. Patient exhibits repeated signs of bruising, inconsistent with a fall. Recommending discreet inquiry. Mother insists injuries result from general clumsiness. Father absent from consultation. Child fearful and unresponsive. Eliza covered her mouth. "My God!" Poirot laid the page down. "And another," he murmured. He lifted the next, this one a letter addressed to Edmund. "You must never reveal what you saw. The family cannot endure another scandal." Another page. "Your memory has tricked you. Do not trust it. You are only a child." Another. "The truth died with her. Let it rest." Japp clenched his fist. Someone was gaslighting him for years. Poirot nodded. "Yes. The question is who and why?" Lydia coughed, struggling to sit up. I don't know who wrote those letters. Edmund never showed them to me." Poirot watched her carefully. "Perhaps not, but you knew they existed." Her eyes flashed. "No, I swear." From behind them came a sudden echoing slam, the sound of the cellar's side door. Japp spun around. "He's here!" Poirot hissed. "Do not chase him blindly, Inspector." But Japp was already moving, lantern swinging wildly as he sprinted toward the noise. Poirot rose, helping Lydia to her feet. Eliza hovered close, trembling. "Poirot," she whispered, "who would do this to a child, to Edmund, to Mary?" Poirot's jaw tightened. Someone who feared the truth more than the guilt. He picked up the medical report again. Someone who lived in this house then, and now. Above them, footsteps thundered across the floorboards, quick, frantic, disappearing toward the east wing. The killer! Japp shouted in the distance, "He's heading upstairs!" Poirot handed Lydia into Eliza's arms. "Stay together. Do not go anywhere." Poirot strode to the stairs, lantern held high, voice low and cold. The time for shadows ends now. He ascended into the storm of footsteps above. Behind him, the cellar went silent again, its secrets exposed at last, but its darkness still hungry. Chapter 9. When the mask slips, Poirot emerged from the cellar into a manor transformed by chaos. The storm outside battered the windows with relentless fury, each strike echoing like a warning. The upper floor trembled with hurried footsteps. Japp in pursuit of someone swift and desperate. Poirot adjusted his grip on the lantern and ascended the staircase with controlled speed. The air grew heavier as he neared the east wing, thick with dread and a faint trace of something else. Perfume, floral, subtle, yet unmistakable to one with Poirot's keen senses. He reached the landing. A door slammed at the far end of the corridor. Poirot raised his voice, firm but calm. "Inspector Japp!" No answer, only the rustle of curtains in the draughty hall. Poirot moved forward, lantern guiding him past portraits whose painted eyes seemed to follow his progress. Halfway down the corridor, he paused, noticing something on the floor. A trail, droplets of blood, fresh, bright, spaced irregularly. Not enough to signal mortal danger, but enough to suggest a struggle. Poirot crouched, examining the drops. "Not the inspector's blood," he murmured. The colour was lighter, tinged with a watery sheen. Someone grazed, or someone pretended to be wounded. He straightened. Someone was staging yet another false trail. He continued forward until he reached the last door in the corridor, the old sewing room. Its door hung open, creaking as the wind pressured it from behind. Poirot stepped inside. The room was dim, filled with rolls of fabric, mannequins, and the faint scent of lavender soap. A single lantern burned on the desk, casting long, trembling shadows. "Jap!" Poirot called again. Still no reply. Instead, another voice emerged, soft, breathless. "Poirot!" He turned. Lydia Redgrave stood by the far wall, one hand pressed to her temple, the other trembling against the edge of a cabinet. Her nightdress was torn, but not severely, her breathing shallow, yet steady. "Madame," Poirot said carefully, "you should not have left the cellar." Lydia shook her head, eyes wild. "He came after me. I ran. I hid. Please, you must protect me." Poirot studied her. The frantic tremble, the quiver of her lip, the panic that seemed just a shade too rehearsed. "Madame," he said softly, "who attacked you?" She swallowed. I didn't see his face." Poirot nodded slowly, curious, "For you claimed downstairs that he pushed you." Lydia's eyes widened. Yes, I meant." Poirot stepped closer, and yet there was no sign of a struggle. No debris on the floor, no smudges on your gown. Your wound, he gestured gently to her temple, is shallow and controlled, more consistent with a strike delivered by oneself. Lydia's breath hitched. "Poirot, you don't believe me?" Poirot lifted a hand. "I believe, madame, that you are frightened, but not of the man who attacked you." Her lips parted. "What do you mean? You are frightened?" Poirot whispered. "Of the truth." Her face went still. Too still. Poirot continued, voice low and precise. "Your daughter Mary did not fall by accident. Someone abused her regularly, as the medical report shows. The doctor raised concerns, but the matter was covered. The letters urging silence, those came from someone who sought to remove all suspicion." Lydia's eyes shimmered. Her hands tightened at her sides. Poirot's eyebrow lifted. "You knew, madame. You knew what happened to Mary, but to protect the family name, you insisted it was her clumsiness. And when Edmund witnessed something incriminating, you silenced him. You gaslighted him. Years of whispered doubts, years of undermining his memories." Lydia's face contorted. "I did what I had to." Poirot nodded. "Oui, but murder and deception are not the same. Someone else exploited your silence." Before Lydia could respond, a sudden sound erupted behind the curtain beside her. A sharp gasp, followed by the clatter of something metallic hitting the floor. Poirot turned sharply. "Come out," he said, "if you please." The curtain shivered, and Eliza stepped forward, pale as moonlight, hands trembling, tears streaking her cheeks. Lydia recoiled. "Eliza, what are you doing here?" Eliza held something in her shaking hand, a small silver key. Poirot recognized it immediately. "The cellar's side door key," he murmured. Eliza's voice cracked. "Yes, I found it in your room, Lydia." Lydia froze. Poirot observed her reaction, cold panic settling into place. "Oh," he whispered, "so that is how you orchestrated the cellar attack. You staged it yourself to appear the victim." Lydia's voice rose, brittle as shattered glass. "You think I killed Edmund, my own husband?" Poirot did not answer immediately. He looked instead at Eliza, still shaking, still holding the silver key like a talisman against truth. "Eliza," Poirot said gently, "you overheard more than the end of our conversation, did you not?" She nodded slowly. "I've known for years that something was wrong. The way Lydia controlled everything, the way Edmund changed, the fear in him. But I didn't know about the injuries, about Mary." Her voice broke. "And now Edmund is dead." Poirot stepped toward Lydia. "But you, madame, your guilt is not the guilt of murder. You lied, yes. You hid a terrible truth. But you are not the one who eliminated Edmund. Lydia's face twisted. Then who? Poirot turned to Eliza. His eyes softened with terrible certainty. Eliza Thorne. She is the one who entered the attic. She is the one who unlocked the nursery at night. She is the one who moved the evidence, wrote the warnings, and stalked us through the manor. Eliza stared at him, horror widening her eyes. No, she whispered. Poirot, please, don't say that. Poirot raised a hand. You did not mean to kill Edmund, but you feared what he finally remembered. Silence swelled. Then, didn't kill him, Eliza sobbed, collapsing to her knees. I only wanted him to tell the truth. I wanted him to free himself. Poirot shook his head, voice quiet but firm. No, mademoiselle, you wanted him to accuse the true culprit. His gaze drifted back to Lydia, the mother who hid the bruises, the mother who lied. Eliza's tears fell harder. But I never wanted anyone dead, she whispered. I only wanted justice for Mary. I only wanted— Her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. Someone to finally see. Poirot knelt beside her. Then, mademoiselle, he said softly, the time has come to reveal everything. Behind them, footsteps thundered, Japp returning at last. Poirot! He shouted. I lost him, whoever he is. Poirot stood slowly. No, Inspector, he said. His gaze returned to Lydia Redgrave. We have found our killer. Chapter 10. The Final Light in the Attic. The storm had begun to die, leaving the manor in a trembling hush. A silence so fragile one could almost hear the echo of old memories brushing against its walls. Poirot stood in the drawing-room, lantern on the table beside him. Japp, stern and waiting, Eliza, pale and hollow-eyed, Lydia, rigid as carved stone. Charles hovered near the doorway, stunned by the unfolding nightmare, though Poirot kept a careful eye on him. Poirot smoothed his moustache, his voice steady. Mes amis, the hour has come to gather threads into a single tapestry. Lydia glared at him. You're mistaken, Poirot. I hid nothing. I protected my children. That is all. Poirot tilted his head. Protection, madame, does not include altering medical reports, bribing a doctor, and crafting letters to convince Edmund he remembered nothing. Charles gasped. Mother, you did that! Lydia's composure cracked for the first time. Her voice wavered. I did what was necessary. Edmund was fragile, disturbed. He saw shadows where none existed. Poirot stepped forward. No, madame. It is you who saw threats everywhere. Threats to your reputation, to your standing, to the illusion of the perfect family. He let the words settle. And when Mary died on those stairs, you shaped the narrative before anyone dared question you. Japp rubbed his temples. So Lydia killed her own daughter? Poirot turned sharply. No, Lydia did not kill Mary. Stunned silence. Poirot walked toward the window, lit faintly by storm-soaked dawn. The answer, I fear, lies deeper, past the facade, past the lies. For the person responsible for Mary's injuries was someone who spent more time with her than even Lydia did. He turned to Eliza. Eliza froze. Poirot! No. Yes, mademoiselle. Poirot's voice was soft but resolute. It was you. Lydia choked on a gasp. Charles stumbled backward. Japp's eyes widened. Eliza trembled uncontrollably. You think I hurt her? I loved Mary. I would never— Poirot raised a hand. I do not say you deliberately hurt her. But harm can arise not only from malice. There are those who become possessive, who crave affection they do not receive elsewhere. He continued, eyes piercing into her. Mary adored you. And you, mademoiselle, adored her in return, perhaps too deeply. A touch too forceful, a game too rough, and then, one tragic afternoon, a push in anger or panic. Eliza's sob escaped like a torn ribbon. I didn't push her. Poirot stepped closer. But you were there. You witnessed the fall, and Edmund saw you. Her tears froze. Edmund? Saw? Poirot nodded. Yes. A child witnessing something they cannot name or understand. He only recalled fragments, but enough to haunt him. Enough to terrify you. Eliza shook her head violently. No, I didn't kill Edmund. Poirot's voice remained calm. You followed him into the attic that evening because he told you he remembered the truth. You panicked. You tried to stop him. You did not intend to kill him, but he stepped back, lost his balance, and fell. Eliza collapsed to her knees again, sobbing. I tried to save him. I grabbed his arm. I swear, I tried. Poirot's eyes softened. Oui, mademoiselle. That I believe, Japp exhaled, shoulders sagging. But all the staging, the notes, the stalking. Eliza wiped her tears, voice trembling. I was trying to point the blame toward Lydia. I needed the truth out. I couldn't live with it anymore. But I couldn't confess. Not after all these years. Poirot nodded. You feared the house, its memories, would turn against you. So you manipulated the investigation, creating diversions, leading us to clues, but never the full truth. Lydia stared at her, shaking. You killed my husband? Eliza looked up, eyes hollow with pain. He was going to expose me, and I couldn't let it happen. I thought I could frighten him, make him leave the house again, but he slipped. It wasn't supposed to happen. I never meant to. Her words dissolved into sobs. Poirot turned to Japp. Inspector, the case is clear. Mademoiselle Thorne must be taken into custody. She will face justice. Japp nodded slowly, sorrow shadowing his features. Eliza Thorne, I'm placing you under arrest for the manslaughter of Edmund Redgrave. Eliza didn't resist. She rose, as though centuries older, and allowed Japp to guide her forward. Her voice was a ghost's whisper. I only wanted someone to see Mary, to remember her, to know it wasn't an accident. Poirot replied gently, They will remember her, mademoiselle, but not in the way you hoped. As she disappeared with Japp into the dim corridor, Lydia sank into a chair, trembling like a faded leaf caught in a final gust. Poirot approached her. You see, madame, your silence allowed tragedy to flourish. Had you faced the truth years ago, perhaps this night might never have come. Lydia bowed her head. What will become of us now? Poirot looked toward the attic stairwell, where dawn's pale light crept downward like a hesitant promise. Life will continue, madame. It always does. But now the house breathes again, no longer smothered by secrets. Charles placed a hand on his mother's shoulder. I'll take care of her, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot nodded, touched faintly by the moment. At last he picked up his hat and lantern. The case is closed, but remember, truth is a light that burns away shadows, even when we fear its flame. He stepped into the morning air as the storm clouds parted, leaving the manor behind like a wounded giant, exhaling after a long, tortured night. The attic, the nursery, the cellar, their secrets laid bare. Hercule Poirot had restored order. But the echoes of the past would linger, whispering softly through the old manor's rafters. Truth will